get into consulting. So usually you have case interviews, you have guesstimate interviews, you have a general HR round as well. So what you do in a general interview is, you walk into the interview, the interviewer will ask you questions, just like, tell me about yourself, where do you come from? So you give your basic introductions, saying, hi, I'm XYZ, I've graduated from Hindu College, etc. And this is what I like to do in my free time. And then they dive a little deeper into why do you want to do consulting. So for every interview, I believe there are three important things that you have to definitely focus on. First, you should have an answer of why are you sitting in that interview. When they ask you, why do you want to get into Accenture or why do you want to do consulting, you should have a very rock solid answer for that. Second, when they ask you that where do you, what is the role to you? I mean, what do you understand of the role? So you should know what that JD said when it came in the mail, when the placecom sent it to you. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि बस पढ़ लिया और चला गया वो कहीं 100 mails में. You should, before going into an interview, you should know what the interviewer is expecting of you. All right. And third, and the most important is that for any interview, there are some things that are very key. That, for example, in a product management interview, they're going to ask you a Prodman case. In a consulting interview, they're going to ask you a business case. So you should be very familiar with how you solve a particular case or a guesstimate. So for a consulting interview, I say, and I repeat, that one, you should know why are you there for the interview. Second, you should be very familiar with the role, with the JD. And third, you should be very familiar with the key of that interview, which is your guesstimates and cases. Now, what happens is that they spend approximately 5 minutes in a general discussion to know about you, to make you feel comfortable. Then about 5 to 10 minutes asking you these behavioral questions as to where you come from, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what drives you, what is your passion, what's the most important achievement that you have ever had. And then slowly and steadily, once they understand your CV, they dive into a guesstimate or case. Mostly the guesstimates or cases are from your CV. So for example, I have this thing written in my CV that I like to dance and I like to play basketball. So someone asked me that, okay, so how many basketballs can fit inside this interview hall? And that was a guesstimate for me. And I was just like, I was taken aback. I'm like, oh, they expect me to solve it in a guesstimate manner. So you should have those, you should catch on those clues. And then I think they spend about 30 minutes on a guesstimate or case, like maximum, and then they wrap up. Now, what is important in a case or a guesstimate is not really that, I didn't have to get that number of basketball in the room right. Like if it was 100, then I didn't have to get that 100 right. It was more important that how I reached that number. So the process, the approach, and the way I'm approaching, the way I'm talking to the interviewer about my solution is more important. So that's why I've written here very boldly that being right in a client-friendly manner is very important. And by client I mean the interviewer here. Now, what they really see when you're solving cases and guesstimates is, so they sometimes they'll throw you something which you're not very familiar with. So how do you think on your feet? How prompt are you? Or how aware are you of the world around you? For example, if someone asks you that number of electronic vehicles in Gurgaon, and you don't know anything about electronic vehicles, but then how do you come to that number? What are the key day-to-day hints that you take up on to come to that guesstimate, or to drive that guesstimate? How quickly you think is one of the key important things, right? Second is, how do you structure your case or guesstimate, which we'll talk about a little more in detail in the second and third day, but just to give you an overview. that it shouldn't be all over the place. It shouldn't be, oh, okay, so Gurgaon's population is this, then number of people driving electronic vehicles could be this percentage. Nothing like that. It has to be a very logical and flowy guesstimate or case. So you say, okay, so number of people in Gurgaon is this, number of people who own a vehicle is this. These are the salary brackets. Most probably, a lower income group cannot afford an electronic vehicle or are not aware of it, etc., etc. And that's how you structure your guesstimate. Then, third and foremost, is your quantitative skills, which are your calculations. So, uh, some key numbers you should be very aware of. So you can't say that India's population is 5-6 billion. You can't say that. You should know what's the number. You can't say that Gurgaon estimates for 50% of Haryana's population. You can't say that. You need to have correct assumptions, you need to have correct numbers, and you need to calculate things really fast. So sometimes what will happen is that you'll say, oh, I'm going to take 30% of this, and 30% of let's say a complicated number, and you're coming to a very wrong calculation is like a correct no. So the interviewer feels that while the assumption was right, but this person did not know what is 30% of a very basic number. तो वहीं पे क्रॉस हो जाएगा, क्योंकि तुम लोग इतने स्मार्ट हो, यू कमिंग फ्रॉम ग्रेट कॉलेजेस इन टी यू, एंड you can't do a basic math, that is not acceptable. So when to round off, when not to round off, how to calculate that percentage quickly. Like if I'm doing a 27%, I should do 25 plus 2% and not like 27 upon 100 into that number. So that should come to your head very quickly. Uh, then, okay, so now this is solving. But then, how are you presenting it on a paper? So when someone asks you a guesstimate, you usually take a pen and paper and you start doing it. Always carry your pen. Don't ask for a pen from the interviewer. And then you just start solving it. And once you start solving it, so the two things that are very important: how you're communicating with the interviewer. So now let's say I don't know something about a case. The interviewer gave me a case, and I want to ask him a question. But the interviewer, I want to ask him, but I'm not asking him, or something like that. Or I'm thinking inside my head, I'm not letting the interviewer know what I'm thinking. It's like a big no in consulting. So you always communicate what you are thinking. So if you're thinking that, I think maybe a logical step would be to take 30% of this, then you should say it out loud so the interviewer knows what you're thinking. So that is key. Communication is key here. And then the presentation. So how are you writing it on a paper? Are you making a mess on that paper? Or does your case look like a very well structured boxes, very well written? You may have a pathetic handwriting, but you can always make it a neat page of guesstimate or case. All right, I'm going to take a pause. If you have any questions, you can shoot. Anyone? Okay, let's go back. Right. So, what is it that you do and what is it that you don't do in an interview? As I think I've already talked about these, but you have to listen to the interviewer. Don't talk over him, and don't sit mum while solving a case or a guesstimate. Just listen to what he's saying, make a note of it, and then move on, and then respond to what he's saying. Develop your own framework. It's very important because sometimes what happens is कि हमें एक केस की बुक दे दी गई है जिसके अंदर 5 फ्रेमवर्क है, या फिर वृंदा ने एक बार बताया था कि 5 फ्रेमवर्क है उससे केसेस हो जाते हैं, तो हम तो वो 5 केसेस फ्रेमवर्क के अंदर ही हम फिट करेंगे हमें जो भी केस मिला है. नेवर डू दैट. ओके, नेवर. So what you have to do is you have to think on your feet and develop your own framework. Sometimes a profitability framework can be applicable to a case study. At other times, a profitability framework with a different, with some tweaking would apply to a case study. So at that time, you have to customize and create your own frameworks, depending on the problem that is thrown to you. Then there are going to be times when what you're doing is कि आपने बोला कि रेवेन्यू कम हो रहा है और उसके आपने 5 इश्यूज निकाल दिए कि ये 5 इश्यूज है जिनकी वजह से रेवेन्यू कम हो रहा है। तो उसमें से यू हैव टू टेक अ जजमेंट एंड यू हैव टू चूज द टॉप, you know, issues that are impacting revenue. You can't do a deep dive into all 5 of them. इतना टाइम नहीं होता इंटरव्यूअर के पास और इतना इंटरेस्ट भी नहीं होता इंटरव्यूअर को, तो इंटरव्यूअर बोलेगा कि ओके देन यू नो जस्ट टू चूज द टॉप 2 एंड यू नो गो अहेड विद इट. So at that time you need to have that sense of what is high impact and what is low impact. And when you're giving solutions, okay, so this is analysis. When you're giving solutions, it has to be a solid conclusion of every case and every guesstimate. Not so much for guesstimates, but for cases. And you have to explore variety of solutions that you're giving to your client. So if I tell you that I own a business and I'm into food delivery, but I don't know how to maximize my orders, you solve a complete case for it. You come and tell me that, you know, these are your cost levers, these are your revenue levers, this is what you should do, and you come up with one solution. That doesn't work. You need to have, you put your creativity hat on and you come up with 10 solutions for me, and then you rate them, 1 to 10 in terms of priority, and then I ask you to choose the top 3 maybe. And that is where you choose that, high impact solutions, and tell me these 3 are, top priority, rest 7 are like good to do. All right, and then I think I've bored you enough on calculations, so I'm not going to go into the last point. All right, then what to avoid. So sometimes when the interviewer gives you a case, so he tells you that okay, let's take the same case. I tell you that I run a food delivery business and my objective is I need to earn more. Now, earn more can happen in variety of ways. I may be saying that I need more customers. I may be saying I need to increase my order value. I may be saying that I want to decrease cost. How would you know what I'm trying to say? That is where you tend to fall for things like incorrect interpretation of the objective. How to tackle that is you talk to the interviewer, ask them. So, you come to me and you say that, okay, Vrinda, tell me, why do you think, what is it that you want to improve? Do you want it to increase your number of customers? Do you want more orders in a day? Do you want to maximize the orders from existing customers? Or do you want to, work on your cost? And then I tell you, okay, maybe I think I have enough customers, I have enough orders in a day. I want to work on my cost. And that is your case objective. Your objective is helping me drive my numbers by reducing the cost, right? Then second, and this is the most common mistake that all of us do, we do not take time before answering a question. We get into, we don't listen to listen, we listen to answer. That is the most commonly made mistake. We have to avoid that at any cost. Always just try and understand what the interviewer is asking you. Why is he asking you that question? Then let's say if you give me a solution as an interviewee and I tell you, all right, I think this is fine, but I think कि इसकी वजह से ये प्रॉब्लम होगा, तो तुम्हें एकदम ऐसे ओवर कॉन्फिडेंट होके डिफेंड नहीं करना है सोल्यूशन को. यू आस्क मी दैट व्हाई डू आई थिंक दैट, what is my thought process, where am I coming from, and then either you accept it, or even if you disagree with it, you have to be very polite about it. Okay, Vrinda, I think that maybe you could be right, but the other aspect of it could be XYZ, and that can also be right. Fourth thing that you have to avoid is do not think internally. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. Keep talking to the interviewer. So if you're solving a case, you have to keep talking. So I'm gonna send you some links after this workshop. Just look at how people are solving cases, right? They are talking to the interviewer. So they're saying, all right, so I think that if you want to reduce your cost, let me get an understanding of your cost levers. As per my understanding, your cost levers are packaging, delivery, raw material, and personnel cost. Do you think there's any fifth lever that you can think of, Vrinda? And then I say, okay, no, I think these 4 are good to go. Now I know that you have said it out loud that these are the 4 levers that you're thinking about, so it's in my head. What you're writing on a paper is not going to be in my head. I don't know what you're writing on the paper. I'm not even interested in looking at it. That writing on the paper is for you. What you're speaking matters to me. So you have to always talk to me or talk to the interviewer while solving a case. Then yes, what to avoid sticking to an artificial framework, which I've already talked about. And then last and most important, don't jump to conclusions. Um, don't like for example, I tell you that okay, I think my personnel cost is high. Then you don't just go and say, oh, reduce the number of personnels. No, maybe I have the right number of personnels, but uh, I'm paying them more. So let's go into frameworks, which is the trickier part. Okay, abhi tak it was all easy. All these things you guys already know. You've come to such great colleges, and I'm sure that every day you're talking to people around you who are very smart, very intelligent. So you know how to shape conversations, right? So I don't think interview is going to be a very big deal for any of you. Uh, the challenge is the next part of the presentation has some frameworks, right? Now, these the biggest challenge is to understand these frameworks, adapt them, but not to get caught up in them. So I am saying this again and again: never stick to a bookish framework, but also don't completely forget it. It forms the basis of the way you talk, the way you solve, the way you communicate, right? So let me share my screen again and let's get into the first framework that we're talking about, or not so much of a framework, but yeah. All right. So, okay, how do I explain this? So, we have our admins, right, in college. Sometimes we have to go and submit something like let's say fees, okay? Because okay, so you guys are all COVID generation, but at our times we had to go to the admin, room and submit that fee slip manually. So the process was that we submit our fees, maybe let's say on an online portal. Then we get that receipt, we get it printed. Then we put our small signatures down there, mark the date. Then we go to the admin, we submit that slip, we get a receipt in return, and that's when the fee submission process was complete. If I have to give you a case that how do you make life easy for a DU student, then one of the things that you could do is say that okay, so a DU student has to do these 10 things in a day. One of them is not in a day, in a year, and one of them is paying the fees. So I'm going to pick that process, and I think I'm going to improve on that process. So what you would do is you would make small boxes for each step that I just mentioned, and you'll say okay, so this is the process at every step. So for example, first, when I'm submitting my fees on the portal, that's my first step. You take that up and you say that okay, so here the problems could be that DU portals are very obsolete, they keep hanging, and there are times when students have faced multiple debits for one of for one payment, etc., etc. And then similarly, you go to the next step, and then you list down the problems, and then you go to the next step, and so on and so forth. And once you've listed all these problems, so you know that you have covered each step of the process. And if you have to optimize this whole process, what you can do is if every step you could optimize, with one improvement, that means your whole process, which had let's say 6 steps, would have 6 improvements in total. That would remarkably change how a DU student, feels, or their experience. It will differ from case to case, and the interviewer will keep giving you hints कि okay, नहीं कोई lag नहीं है. I think मेरे को लग रहा है कि raw materials कम आ रहे हैं, and इसलिए हम लोग we're not producing enough. And that's where your solutioning will come in. कि अच्छा, now you know this part of the problem I have to focus on, this part of the process I have to focus on. So it's very important to create a process map wherever applicable. Again and again, I'm going to say this line: wherever applicable. All these frameworks may not apply to each and every case. Okay. Um, so now let's take another example. Let's take cloth manufacturing. Um I get the raw material, I, you know, do inbound logistics, I manufacture it, and I don't have enough distributors. So now I know that my problem is at the distribution stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deep dive into distribution, further understand what are the different branches of problems, and then choose the branch of problem which is most applicable to my client, and then give my inputs. Maybe in another case, my distribution is also perfect. Everything up till here is perfect. The problem is in reaching the customer. So then I give the solution that, oh, okay, so you're not able to reach the customer. That means that maybe the customer is not aware of your product. Maybe they find it pricey. Maybe they find it cheap. Maybe they think that the competitors are better. Maybe they just don't like the product. So out of these five, then the interviewer will tell you, will give you the hint that, okay, I think it is that the customer is not aware. So now your problem, instead of being ki market share बढ़ाना है, your problem is a small chunk of it, which is कि the customer is not aware. So what do I do to create awareness? Do I do marketing? Do I do do I improve my sales strategy? Do I एडवर्टाइज? मार्केटिंग के अंदर भी फिर 10 एस्पेक्ट हो जाते हैं कि यार तुम्हें एडवर्टीजमेंट करना है, सोशल मीडिया मार्केटिंग करनी है, टीवी एडवर्टाइजमेंट करना है, न्यूज़पेपर में एड्स देने हैं, or do how do you want to sell? Do you want to go to a mall and set up a shop? Do you want to sell online? Do you want to sell through Instagram and whatnot? So, or to reach this stage, you have to start from one big branch, which is, what is the process? Tell me the process. Then out of those 5 or 10 step process, which steps are more important to me? So what you do is you put like a mark. Okay, so then you put, okay, so maybe distribution is important to me and customer is, these are the two areas I have to look at. Then the interviewer will tell you, okay, I think the problem is not with distributor, it's just the customer. तो तुम्हारी वो जो बहुत बड़ी सी प्रॉब्लम थी वो अब थर्ड स्टेप पे ब्रेक डाउन होकर सिर्फ कस्टमर पे आ गई. कस्टमर के बाद भी जो मैंने अभी सारे स्टेप्स बताए उसके अंदर से भी तुम्हें interviewer बोलता है कि no, okay, only this one is the problem for me. So then you solve for this one, and that's where you are done. So the biggest of the problem becomes like a very small problem, and then you can give very focused solutions, and then you can think more. इतने बड़े प्रोसेस में तो बहुत कुछ सोच सकते हो. तो अभी जो मैंने बताया उसके अंदर पहले वाले प्रिंसिपल्स को अगर हम ऐड करें तो हमें क्या क्या नहीं करना. हमें डायरेक्ट कंक्लूजन पे जंप नहीं करना. हमें इंटरव्यू की बात सुननी है, इंटरव्यू से इंटरेक्ट करना है, उसे बोलना है कि मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है कि डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन या कस्टमर में प्रॉब्लम है, do you think I'm taking the right approach? So the interviewer will say, okay, yeah, I think your approach is fine. Maybe out of distribution and customer, just choose customer, and so on and so forth. So you're interacting, you're not jumping to conclusion, and you're very clear on what your thought process is, and you're conveying it to the interviewer. All right. So this is process mapping for you. This is how it helps.